All right, thank you, Chimaroke, for that background report. And we have in the studio two gentlemen that will help us take a look at the journey so far on Nigeria's return to democracy. We have Honorable Jeff Mba, Chairman House Committee on Information and Communication, a member representing Ojiriva at the Enugu State House of Assembly. You are welcome to Searchlight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Also is our regular guest, Professor JEHU ONYEKWERE NNAJI, a professor of international law and global politics. Yeah, welcome to Searchlight, Prof.
Thank you so much, and good evening.
All right, let's start with Honorable Mba, who is currently in power. The background report at the beginning, the simplest or the easiest definition of democracy, the government for the people, by the people, and for the people. Can we say the case is the same with Nigerian democracy?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, viewers. I will start by saying that no matter what definition you give democracy, it is centered on the welfare of the people. And every principle that involves in democracy, defines it around the people. The rule of law, the principles of separation of powers, and having the people participate in governance, in determining what concerns them. And so far in Nigeria, we can say we have so many issues that surround the type of democracy we practice here. First, it has not truly internalized in our culture and our own system of life. The past 21 years, there's been a lot of issues about our own democracy, but in all, we can say that it is far, far better than where we're coming from, which is the military rule. We have been able to see improvement in infrastructural development. We have also been able to see some freedom in terms of press, people saying their minds and people contributing to governance and good governance.
Okay.
And so far we can say we have moved a little step forward, but not too good.
All right. Thank you for that insight. And Prof, do you agree with Honorable that Nigeria has done well to some extent when it comes to the democratic governance that is being practiced in Nigeria? How can you access democracy in Nigeria?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Nigeria has passed through a lot of turbulent times when it has to do with politics and democracy. If we look at the events of 1959 during the general elections of NCNC, up to the time Nigeria got independence in 1960, then Nigeria became a republic in 1963, and of course from then we've always tried to practice this democracy as it should be in the Western world. But despite the different efforts made by different ethnic groups, as well as the government paraphernalia, to put these politics in place, it has always come with its own problems, which were more or less in its own nature. Let me try to zero in on what happened after the elections of 1993, which of course we are trying to fall back on as the Democracy Day. I know if you ask a lot of Nigerians, they'll come with different viewpoints as to what should be the Democracy Day. A lot of people said it was 1999, which of course, if you check from that time till now, have 21 years of democracy. But of course, I have my own misgivings because if anybody that was of age in 1993, except for those who read in the books, but for anybody that was of age who will agree with me that Nigeria passed through a lot of turbulent military rule, which of course, was second longest military rule after the one of Yakubu Gowon, which was General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. Of course, the man Babangida tried to form a diarchy. This was the first time it happened in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have the military and the civilian ruling, contemporaneously. Of course, it was difficult for Nigeria to practice because going by the fact that January 1992 there was this election for governorship, regional elections, which were to culminate with the general elections of the presidency in 1993. Nigerians were yearning for this democracy because we have passed through a lot of very difficult times in terms of military rules, which of course a lot of lives were lost. So Nigerians in that quest for true rule, which is government of the people, by the people, and for the people, was eventually truncated badly on June 12, after a lot of people went to polls. And of course, the events leading to the elections, despite the fact that primaries were cancelled in 1992, till end of 1992, Nigerians had hope. And this didn't eventually materialize. So the wound is still there. So Nigeria has gone through these ups and downs, but all the same, I will give it a pass mark, because if we look at other foremost democracies that have even reached half of a millennium in years, so they are still passing through their difficult times. So Nigeria, plus minus, is making some gains.
All right. So you're of the view that June 12th is good enough as Democracy Day in Nigeria. What about you, Honorable? Suddenly in 2019, the date was shifted from May 29th to June 12th in honor of MKO Abiola. And there are so many other people that gave their lives and equally paid the supreme price to see that democracy is entrenched in Nigeria.
I don't believe that June 12th should be called Democracy Day.
Okay.
It's rather a day of reflection for Nigerians.
All right.
Where we'll think about who are we, in the Committee of Nations, and how do we come to where we are now? The issue of June 12th is about injustice done against democracy itself. It is not the celebration of democracy.
Okay.
If you're celebrating democracy, you should be celebrating a proper handover, to civilian rule, either the beginning of democracy or the success of democracy. It is not the failure of democracy that should be celebrated. For whatever reason that date was changed, it's up to them. But for me as a person, I don't think June 12th should be called Democracy Day.
All right. Let's hear from our learned colleague, Prof. Do you think Nigeria as a country and Nigerians as a people have learned any lesson from events of June 12th?
Yes. You see, this June 12, 1993 is very symbolic, because if we remember, after the elections were annulled, there were lots and lots of difficulties which we experienced in the country then, which eventually made it to be a yearly event. Even in 1994, we discovered that a lot of things, trade unions, paying, so many of them went on strike, banks were on strike, people couldn't get money, there was no petrol, and people were suffering to get to different places of businesses and employment. Then, one thing is very paramount here. During the exit or exodus of people from different parts of the country to their own areas of natural abode, we discovered a lot of people lost their lives. So I won't say that we are trying to do a memorial for those who died, but it was because that election of 1993 was very emblematic of democracy, because that was the only way Nigerians could see democracy from the standpoint of the normal Democrat. Because even the general, controlling the nation then, who was the president, he was the one that made himself a military president, the first time we ever had that. He was supposed to be head of state, but that terminology of president came into to use. Then he was of the view that August 27 would be the handover, power, because Nigerians were yearning for that. You see, we were having a kind of a corollary of events, which will eventually culminate with the handover, but that never happened. So, and I don't think it will be a good thing if we deny ourselves that opportunity, because we have wished it for ourselves, and eventually it came to pass. Of course, the man has been posthumously awarded the GCFR, which is Grand Commander of the Federal Republic. But of course, one thing still remains there. There is an ellipsis. Of course, the man should be as well regarded as the president-elect. So I think he was widely acclaimed to be the winner of that election, having scored 58% of the votes. So that was even his opponent, Bashir Othman Tofa, congratulated him on the victory.
All right,
Yeah,
let's. Okay,
wanted
to.
Yes, my problem with that is it appears we're just celebrating one man. Prof just talked about people who gave their life. Some people conducted that election.
Yes.
And it was adjourned the
best
election
in Nigeria.
And in honoring that, in recognizing that day and that event, a lot of people should have come into play. I mean, I just think that it is not about celebrating one man and mentioning that man repeatedly and repeatedly. Yes, I respect that action, the way he came into politics and made his own impact, and through that, a lot of things changed. But I also wish that those who actually suffered because of that June 12th should also be recognized. It should be a holistic thing. It should be looked into, and in coming up, with Democracy Day for June 12th, a lot of other things should be added to, that event in order to make it, a proper democracy.
All right, Prof. The other thing I've observed is that most people keep talking about the conduct of that June 12th election, which also they said MKO Abiola won. Is democracy all about the free and fairness of election, or are there other things, like he pointed out, that should be inculcated in Nigeria's celebration of democracy as a nation?
Yes, as we all know, a whole is greater than some of its parts. So democracy is a whole. It encompasses the individual who is the president and those who eventually put him into power. So I believe that it's something that we have to internalize, because Nigeria being a nascent democracy, it's difficult to put all these things in perspectives. But it is something we have to do one at a time. So given the fact that a lot of people paid the ultimate price, which was death, during that time in the aftermath of the election and its annulment, I believe also that time will eventually give us the energy and the momentum to eventually put these things in the right place in history. So I think that it's a good thing we can do.
Okay, away from June 12th. Honorable, most of the injustices and election rigging, corruption, most of the things that they keep recurring in Nigeria, even during the military and even a current democratic dispensation that we're into, people think that by now we should have done away with such things. How do you feel about Nigeria still having failure in education, our healthcare system, a lot of problems? They are still there. How do you feel about this as someone at the corridors of power?
I think we lay so much emphasis on the democracy and the politics itself. When you talk about democracy, there are institutions that are set up to ensure sustenance of democracy.
Okay.
To ensure development of democracy. Are these institutions properly in place to play their role in making sure that democracy is practiced? For example, you talk about autonomy. We have three arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And even when you talk about educational institutions, okay, there are some of them that are also very important in developing democracy. Once you strengthen these institutions, the result is that you begin to see things fall into line.
Okay.
And if you ignore the institutions and keep talking about the politics of winning elections and conducting free and fair elections, you will never get it right. INEC has to sit up and become INEC, as the name implies, Independent National Electoral Commission. The legislature has to be independent, both financially and otherwise, to stand up and make laws and make representations and oversight even the executives. The judiciary should be allowed to practice free, not, answerable to the
without
executive
interference from anybody.
Or whoever appoints them.
Okay.
So once these institutions are functioning properly and independently, and sincerely, you will see democracy dividend being delivered. In the United States of America, everybody is loyal to the Constitution, okay, not to the president, not to the governor. Once you veer off the Constitution, nobody will support you. You begin to see even your own party man criticize.
All right, thank you for that wonderful contribution. But let's hear from a prof. He mentioned democracy dividends. In your view, what should be this democracy dividend? And do you think Nigerians are actually enjoying democracy dividends since 1999 to date?
Yes, we've always had this friction, between the among the arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. So, because this separation of powers is not functioning effectively in Nigeria, we always blame one arm for the errors of the other, and when there is this interpolation of interest, where the executive will want to make the judiciary to be henpecked. It's not anymore a case of checkmating the exercise of the order, because the exercise of separation of powers is to checkmate. Those in the legislature can impeach the president if there's need. But a situation where the legislature has no power of its own and is dependent on probably funds that come from the president, and the judiciary also is going cap in hand to the president, so they become henpecked. So they are not able to exercise their actions without any interference from the outside. So this is the problem, and that does not allow the dividends of democracy to trickle down to the people.
Okay.
And that is where we are at this moment.
What should be the way forward?
The way forward is that people should strive to maintain their grounds, despite the fact that you may be getting something from one side, and even if you have to lose it, but you have to remember that posterity will remember you for doing what is right. Just like you mentioned about the United States, which of course the Constitution is the ground norm. Of course, it supersedes any other law. Anything that goes contrary to the Constitution is null and void. So if the Constitution has set up a system of government that has to run on three arms, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, that means if any other one goes contrary to its powers or goes ultra vires, the other one has a right to checkmate it.
All right, let's hear from our guest that is from the legislative arms. Can you give us your final words, especially how your own arm of the government will help see that we enjoy dividends of democracy?
Belong to the people.
Okay.
The people must sit up to take the power that belongs to them and make those representing them to work for them and deliver the democracy dividend.
All right, thank you for that succinct final words of yours. And also thank you, Prof, for making it to Searchlight tonight. To you, our viewers, we thank you for making it a date with us always on Searchlight. And remember that Searchlight will stay come your way the same time next week. Good night.